Today on the Coach of What podcast, we have a very special guest joining the show today. Last week, you guys heard some technical difficulties with that episode, and so hopefully that's all washed out, and we're back to normal production here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Today we have a coach joining us from Wayne State College. She's the head softball coach there. While her time at Wayne State, this is going to be her fourth year here. But prior to this, she was at a few different schools, including spending time at South Dakota as an athlete. She helped the Coyotes to 28-25 record and a fourth place finish in the Summit League in her final season at USD, University of South Dakota, and her first season as assistant coach at USD. So after she graduated there and she became a coach, she helped coach the Coyotes to a 33-28 record and a 12-6 mark during her time as that first assistant out of her time from there. So she's done a lot of really good things early on into her career. But with that being said, we'd like to welcome Coach Christy Warnock to the Coach's Why podcast.
With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coach's Why podcast.
That's a great question.
That was my Coach's Why.
Welcome back to another Coach of What podcast, guys. We're super excited for this episode. We've got a softball coach joining the show today, all the way from Wayne State University, Coach Christy Warnock, the head softball coach there. Coach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. I'm super excited to have this and talk to you today, so I appreciate you jumping on here. And just like everybody else, I'm not going to make it any different for you. I'm going to let you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself. So where'd you grow up? When you got involved with sports, but maybe when did you get involved with softball, since obviously that's what we're coaching?
Sure, yeah, sure. Well, first thing, I just want to make sure I correct, because there's two different Wayne States. There's a Wayne State University, and we're Wayne State College. Yep, so don't worry, it happens all the time, but I do want to make sure that we get that corrected.
You know what's crazy? Is right behind you, there's a WSC. And I was like, as soon as you said that, I was like, wait, WSC, Wayne State College. I didn't, so.
No problem, people do it all the time.
I should be professional here. I should have this thing on lock. I should know who, where, and what. Should know where you're from. I should know all these things. But
hey, it's good.
I appreciate it. Anyways, I'll take that one. That's my fault. Wayne State College, guys, my bad.
No worries. Yep. So in answer to your question, I am originally from Omaha, Nebraska. This is about an hour and a half from where I'm at right now. Grew up most of my life there. Spent a little bit of time actually living in Auckland, New Zealand. So I had a little bit of an experience there when I was younger, and then came back to Omaha and finished growing up there. Went up to the University of South Dakota, which is in Vermillion, South Dakota, and played my collegiate career there. And then continued on up there as a graduate assistant for 2 years and a full-time assistant for 2 years. And then found myself kind of getting this job falling in my lap, and came down here to Wayne State and have been coaching here for 4 years. So really quick kind of picture, but part of how I got into the sport, I'm the youngest of 5 with 4 older brothers. Okay. And so I kind of grew up on a sports field or diamond. 2 of my brothers played baseball, 2 of them played soccer, and I was kind of just always there, obviously. And so when it came my turn to figure out what I wanted to do, I played basketball, I played soccer, I played softball. Softball it's different than baseball, and so it was kind of a learning experience for my parents too, but that seemed to be the one that stuck, and I've really enjoyed my experience growing up in that and playing in that, and certainly love coaching it. So
absolutely, yeah. So you spent some time, obviously, being just around sports growing up with your family, and then you spent time, like you said, in New Zealand, and obviously spending time in South Dakota playing at the college level. When you were in New Zealand, like, how old were you when you were there?
I was pretty young. I think I turned 5 right when I got there, and 8 right before we came back. So we were there for 3-ish years. Yep.
Okay.
So then I was going to ask you if you got to experience like softball at that level, but yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, so then when you came back to the States and you continued playing sports and all that stuff, you said you spent time in South Dakota to play the college level. So when did you know that you could go and compete? Was there a time frame? What was it about being in high school? When did you know that, hey, I can go? And what obviously was the contributing factor to you actually choosing to go to South Dakota?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think honestly, I just got kind of lucky with the placement as far as like what my travel team was. So I was on a team, it was called Quakes at the time, and then we kind of became Nebraska Gold, which is it's a big travel team. It's a big travel organization in softball now. But when I was there, we were the very first team. And so it's really fun for me to be able to see student athletes in that organization now because I was kind of there at the very beginning of it. But I was really lucky with the coaches that I was being coached by and the team that I was with. We're all pretty athletic group of people, and so we were reasonably successful. And I think just when you're on a team like that and you're surrounded by a pretty good group of girls and good coaches, they kind of just feed that idea of like, hey, is this something you want to do? And so I kind of stumbled into it, I think. And then as far as South Dakota was concerned, this was recruiting then was different than it is now. But
Right.
now there's a lot of rules about you can't talk to student athletes or commit student athletes until they're juniors in high school. But back then you could do it whenever. I mean, there was like eighth graders committing to go to school somewhere.
Right.
And so it was actually fall of my sophomore year in high school that the coach at South Dakota, she actually came to watch somebody on a different team. And this was my high school team, which doesn't happen very often either. And kind of saw me and
Right.
from there it just kind of fell into place. And I went to camp, and um, the biggest thing there was that she offered me a full ride, and I was an outfielder.
Mm,
So getting a full ride
mm,
as an outfielder is like really, really rare. I mean, it's like any sport. A lot of your money is going to go to a pitcher or a
right.
shortstop or something like that. And so to have been lucky enough to get that offer as an outfielder, it was a pretty telling tale of like, hey, she really wants you. And
Yeah.
so there wasn't really a whole lot of other schools that were in the picture at that point in time, and it just felt right. And so we pulled the
Yeah.
trigger, and that's where I ended up.
I gotcha. Okay. Hey, whenever when time's right, and when everything's falling in your lap, you got to take it sometimes. So, okay. So financially, it played a big factor, and like you said, I guess it was the right time, right place. So, you spent time doing that, and so whenever you were in your playing career up there in South Dakota at that school, what's probably the most like memorable thing that you remember from your time frame as an athlete?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I played at South Dakota and I coached there. I have 8 years worth of memories at
Yeah.
that school.
Right.
And I had 2 years under the coach that recruited me, and then 2 years under a new coach. And he came from his name's Robert Wagner. He's the coach that's there now. He
Mm,
came from Arizona State University, and he was actually the assistant in '09 and '11 when they won the national championship. And so it was when you ask about, the most memorable thing, I think maybe how I would answer that is the most impactful thing that happened was him coming in to
mm,
be the head coach because he just absolutely revolutionized my concept of the sport, my concept of myself, what I believed that I could do as a student athlete and as a leader and as a coach, certainly later on. And so it's not really a memory, but when I look back on my time at South Dakota, that is absolutely the most impactful thing that happened while I was there.
when he showed up, yeah, absolutely. So, when did you realize that coaching is something you wanted to do? Right.
Yeah.
So, uh, I mean, was there a coach that influenced you? Was it just you didn't know what you want to do with your life, and there's the spectrum. I've always known, and then I didn't even know I wanted to do this, right? So it's like, what made you decide that I'm gonna do this?
Yeah. I think there's two things. There's a coach that I had when I was younger.
Okay.
Um, I think I was like 12, 13, something like that. And he told me that he thought that I could coach softball. And at the time, it
Okay.
wasn't on my radar at all.
Yeah.
And we laugh at I still interact with him and we laugh about it now, of course, knowing where I ended up. But that was kind of always in my head. And then I think the second thing that really happened, and it was later on, was I had a coach that she wasn't a bad coach by any means. I didn't have a bad relationship with her. It's not like I wasn't playing and I was mad at her or anything. I just felt like she had this incredible opportunity to be extraordinarily impactful in the lives of the girls on our team. But it was only about the softball, and that's all
Right.
that mattered. And I'm a big people person. Like I coach because of the people. I love this sport, but I love these kids.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I felt like that was something that was that she wasn't taking the opportunity to
Hmm.
do, and that it was a wasted opportunity, I think really convinced me like, hey, I can do this, and I'm gonna do this for the kids. And so it kind of changed my perspective on coaching and what I thought that I could do in that role as well.
Absolutely. Okay. So influential coach came and changed your mindset, and talked to you about that. So, whenever you talk about I'm kind of skipping ahead here a little bit, and I'll come back to the other ones. But obviously, that coach was a influential factor into why you're coaching today. So, speak on maybe some of your influential coaches that you might have had in your life, whether it's that one in particular, or maybe it was a college coach. Maybe it could have been somebody that you coached under or with that kind of was influential to you. And then also, while you're speaking on that person or people, tell me something that's like, I guess that you take from them, or from that one or two people, or that multiple people that you've implemented into your coaching style now.
hmm Yeah, I think again, when you ask that, I think of Coach Wagner, who I coached
Okay.
or I played for 2 years, and then I coached with for
Hmm.
4. And the story that always comes to mind, and I'm sure that he hates that I tell the story, but I love it. And it was actually when I was coaching with him. I was
Okay.
a first year graduate assistant, and I had just graduated playing for him, still trying to kind of navigate what my relationship with him
Right.
looks like now. And I remember being in the office, and he had asked me to do something. I don't even remember what I was working on. But I didn't know how to do it. So I went into his office and I was like, okay, who do I need to talk to, or how do I get this done? Um, and he looked at me, and not like mad or not like sharp or anything, and he just said, go figure it out. And I thought, I like, at the moment I was like, oh, okay, like fine. But
Yeah.
as I look back on it, and knowing him and just who he is, like, it was such a impactful story for me, because it was his way of telling me, like, you don't need me to save you from the deep end. You are a smart girl. You're an intelligent person. You can go and do this and find the solution to this yourself. And like I said, it wasn't him being lazy. It wasn't him being mean or sharp. It was just like, hey, you've got this. Go do it. Go
Yeah.
figure it out yourself.
Right.
And I love that, because I think it really set me up for this concept of when I come across things that I've never experienced before, or I come across a situation that is surprising to me or is difficult to me, like, I have the capability to work through it and figure it out myself. And it isn't that we don't need help. It isn't that help is bad. I certainly think there are opportunities where we find the right person, we ask for help. But a lot of times I think we are so much more willing to just right away go ask for help than try and use our own critical thinking and
Right.
work things out ourselves. And so as a human being, that was so big for me, that he would do it purposely. He would oftentimes throw me in the deep end on something. And I appreciate him so much for that, because I did learn to swim on my own. And so
Mm.
at 26, when a head coaching job fell into my lap and I wasn't thinking about that, he had spent years exhorting me and empowering me to feel confident stepping into that role.
Mm.
And I'm really, really grateful for that. So when you ask, what is something you try to do with your student athletes, there's a lot of times that I will um, try and guide them to the answer themselves, and not just give them the answer. I think there are so many times we ask for help and we're just given the answer. And again, there's a
Yeah.
time and a place for that.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important that we teach our kids how to function in a world that isn't just going to give them answers, but teach them how to get to those answers themselves, and also like encourage them and empower them along the way. Like they're capable people, they can do it themselves.
Yeah, I think that's huge actually. Thinking back, I was trying to think about some of the times that I've had that happen to me, and I've probably felt the same way towards, what do you mean? Like I'm asking you for help. Why aren't you helping me? But ultimately they helped you more than you think they did in that moment, right? And so, do you think that that's do you think that that's a area that, and I speak to this because, and I don't know when you graduated high school. I don't. But the newer generation, today's generation, let's just say that, versus, let's say ours, because I don't know, I'm assuming we're probably relatively close to the same age, and then people before that, everybody, like there's been an evolution of athletes and how kids maintain and handle things and whatever's going on, right? It's different and it changes. So you speaking on what you're speaking on, do you think that there's a disconnect between kind of holding somebody's hand in today's generation? And I don't know, I know it's not everywhere, and I know it's not every person or every coach, but do you think at a higher level that's something that you're seeing more of versus more of like go out and find a way to make it happen type of approach?
Yeah. Yeah. I think these generational conversations are always so hard to have, because I think, yes, as a trend, um we're going towards like, I just want the answers given to me. I don't really
Mm.
want to work for them. But I also don't want to just sit on one generation and hate on them either. There's a lot of good that new generations bring in. And so I guess when you're talking about that particular topic, um, and I see it a lot in females too. And maybe that's just because I'm with females all the time, but just this concept of like tiptoeing through failure a little bit. And I try to tell my kids, like, look, I want you to fail flying, and then we'll fail better the next time. Because the reality is, like, you're gonna fail, but if you don't ever try, if you're too scared to try, if you need someone to help you in the deep end all the time, then you never learned. And then someday, when some situation, whether it's your marriage or your kids or your career, comes along and you don't have a person to fall back on, you have to deal with it yourself. And I
Right.
want you in those moments to be able to recall what you learned in my program on how you're capable and you can do it yourself. And again, it's not that help isn't needed, because help is great.
Of course.
It's just you're capable too.
You mentioned, yeah, like the whole conversation about generation. I think that is a hot topic for sure. And I'm kind of the same way. You saying that you feel like women or the female athletes are kind of tiptoeing failure a little bit. So I coached the women's wrestling team at a Carl Albert, so it's a JUCO school in Oklahoma, and so I kind of felt that too when you said that. I was like, I feel like the girls this year are, and I say this year, but like, the girls that I'm coaching, they've kind of, not only this year, but I feel like historically, we've always kind of had a little bit of that tiptoeing, like you said. So it kind of resonated with me because it's been a really important process and mindset change I've been trying to do, to where, we've changed even our team motto this year. We went from, we've always kind of said, and I've always kind of just said, dig deep, right? Like you got to dig deep in life, and it's way deeper than just the dig deep in a match. But we've also changed it this year to all in, because I've mentioned to the girls, like, hey, you have, like, if and I actually don't have my keys on me, but one of the girls got me a little gambling, like little slot machine, a key chain. And the reason why is because after our second or third tournament, we just weren't wrestling where we needed to. We were kind of tiptoeing, and I went up to him and I said, we had a team, pre-practice discussion. And I said, if you guys had all the money in the world, let's just say you had $1 million to go to the casino, are you going to go to a slot machine and bet? Are you going to go do penny slots, or are you going to be comfortable betting all in, knowing that you have unlimited money?
Right.
And everybody said we would obviously go all in. And I said, well, you got to think that your guys' experience and the coaching and everything you guys have inside of you. You guys have all the money in the world, but you guys are currently betting penny stocks. You
Mm,
guys are afraid to bet. And so, they kind of resonated with them. And then that next tournament was actually probably the hardest tournament of the year we went to. And they wrestled better than they've wrestled all year, leading up to that point. And then, we had another one and blah, blah, blah. They still wrestled pretty good. We actually left with some placers at that one. And it was just like,
mhm.
it was cool because that mindset change of that. So, yeah. And so I can say that, like you're saying, some of the, you having to really, have that positive reinforcement, but also let them know, like, you guys can do this if you trust yourself, right? And it's really made a big difference. So, yeah, I guess I whenever you said that, it resonated with me because I feel like this year we really had to change that. So now just so you know, pre podcast when we were talking about how winter break can, how for wrestling it's great because we have this, but contrary to that, it can stop the momentum. Like we were really building momentum to where we wanted to go. So it can definitely go both ways. But regardless, I loved what you just said there about, the mental, but also just how it can be a trend. But at the same time, as what you've been doing is not trying to force them to do something they don't want to do, but just let them kind of feel what it's like to have to figure it out, So I love that. So how did you get into coaching? So I know you were at school, right? And you went pretty much straight into coaching, but you could have chose anywhere, right? As a GA or even as assistant, you could have went anywhere. And I know Coach that you walked in, that second part of your time frame was obviously influential. So I'm sure you wanted to coach under him. But how did you get into that? And this is obviously for coaches who are looking at people who want to get into coaching. But how did you get into your coaching position initially? And then also tell us the time frame. So did you go from your school directly to Wayne State, or did you have kind of an interlude in there somewhere?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I was in college when I kind of thought, maybe this is something that I would want to do. And I think there's an interesting story maybe that comes along with that. Like I mentioned, I'm the youngest of five, and I have four older
Mm-hmm.
brothers. They're all extremely smart, very successful. I mean, I had one that was a lawyer at the time, one that's a business manager for Peter Kiewit, which is a very big company, one that worked in the FBI, and one that was an aerospace engineer. So
Wow.
very, yes, very smart, accomplished men, and incredible men. And so sometimes being the youngest, you look at that situation, and you're like, I want to coach softball, and you feel kind of silly, right? And
Yeah.
so when I first kind of thought about it, I sat on it for a while. I didn't tell anybody, because I didn't. And it's so foolish looking back because my family is incredibly supportive. They're great people. My parents are awesome. So why I ever thought they would think that this was a bad idea, I don't know, but I did.
Right.
And so I sat on it for a little bit, and then I can remember one time, I think it was around this time actually, like October, November maybe, when I was at school, and it was I think it was my sophomore year that I told my parents. I was like, hey, what would you think if I kind of said this would be something I was interested in? And I just remember them saying like, oh, okay, like it could be really cool, and that's great. And at the time I was getting my business degree. I wasn't, I didn't have um specific plan of what I wanted to do
Mm.
with that. Like I said, the number one thing that I knew is that I loved people and that I wanted to be around people. And so I remember them after that point just kind of really encouraging me in it, and like lifting me up in it, and that felt like maybe a sign that that was something that
Mm.
I could do. And so I kind of just pursued that. And then when I got to my senior year, I went into Coach Wagner's office and just told him like, hey, I think this is something I'd like to do. I know you know a lot of people. Can you connect me to someone and see if I can't be a graduate assistant somewhere? And um, I had I had really been praying a lot about like, okay, I want to go somewhere where I can be used and I can learn. I didn't want to go somewhere where I was going to be um, the low man on the totem pole going to get coffee. Like I wanted to learn. And like a week later after practice, Wags was like, "Hey, you want to come over? I want to talk to you about something." This was at the end of practice, so I went over to where he was, and he's like, "Hey, what would you think about just staying here and being a graduate assistant?" And I was like,
Mm,
"Oh, okay." And he's like, "I want to make sure you know, like, I would want to teach you, and I would want you to be someone that would be actively involved in what we're doing." And it just shook me, like he was saying to me, and he does I've never told him this story, but he was saying to me like the exact things that I was praying for. And to me, that was just, I knew it was good. That's where I needed to be. And so I agreed to stay on with him for 2 years. And I was really lucky because even though I was the graduate assistant, he and I knew each other. I knew the program. I knew how he functioned. And so I got to really, I mean, I was really doing a lot of things that full-time assistants do as a graduate
mm,
assistant. So
that's
that was
big.
really lucky, and then again, I stayed on him with him for another 2 years. So as far as the timeline, I played 2 years under the coach that recruited me, 2 years under Coach Wagner. Then I
Yep.
was his graduate assistant for 2 years, and his full-time assistant for 2 years. And I had actually signed my contract to come back for another year when I got a Facebook message from a
Okay.
from a girl that I used to play with in high school. And we were great friends in high school, but hadn't talked since high school.
Mm,
And she had actually come to Wayne and played here. And it had since graduated, but she just over Facebook message was like, "Hey, I know that this job is going to become available. I think you'd be really great for it. I think you should try." And that sent my life into a whirlwind for a little bit.
yeah.
And like I said, fell
Yeah.
into my lap, and here I am.
Yeah, here you are. Yeah, so that's outstanding. Obviously, your family supporting you and the idea of like wanting to do it. It's not. It's always kind of one of those things that's kind of weird. I wouldn't say worrisome, but probably a little tentative. Like you said, you thought about it for a long time. Especially, I mean, I'm an only child, so it's a little bit different. But you know, your older brother's doing what they're doing. I can definitely understand how that might come off to them. But having supportive family, I'm mentioning that because having the supportive family, I think, is big. Not only student athletes, but as coaches and stuff too, right? We all know how it's not the glitz and glamour that they say in terms of, you know, it's not just the wins and losses that coaches are doing. It's everything else. So I can respect that, and I love that your family supported you in that. And shout out to Coach Wags. Sounds like he was a great person. I know you've been mentioning him a lot. So, you know, shout out to him, and I love that. So, you know, as you've spent time, right, like you went from GA to assistant to a coach, right, at Wayne State. What are some challenges that you feel like you faced from when you first started to now? And even if you want to talk about as a head coach, right, kind of as a first year head coach to where now you're in your fourth year, I believe, right?
Hmm.
You mentioned that earlier. So your fourth year of the head coach, what are some challenges you faced non-recruiting wise, just coaching purposes, that you've had to face and that you've overcome, and now you know how to attack it, or you know, not have to deal with them anymore because it's a different, you know, strategy or whatever the case is.
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind, and this actually wasn't when I was a head coach, it's when I was at USD, was COVID and how COVID changed the
Mm,
sports
mm,
world. And the only reason I bring that up is because what I think so many people learned in that aspect of things, particularly leaders, was we had to be adaptable. We had to be
mm. Of
because things were
course.
changing all the time and we were doing things we had never done before, and you had to be adaptable. And if you went into a situation, so really it was the year after COVID that was
Yep.
like crazy
21.
for athletics
Yep.
because there were so many regulations, there were so many things that had changed. There was a lot of kids that were dealing with the post effects of what they went through over COVID. um Now people have an extra year of eligibility. I mean, it just changed everything. And so I think that whole year was a huge lesson in being adaptable.
Yep.
And my kids, it's funny because my kids make fun of me now. I say it all the time, but I'm like, we have to roll with the punches, because stuff changes
Yeah.
constantly. And if we are rigid in our approach, then we're not going to be able to be very successful because
Yep.
it could be as simple. I mean, we're an outdoor sport in Nebraska playing in like March. So
Yeah.
we're playing in 30 degrees. Like it's cold. If there's a snowstorm, we have to adjust. Like things change everything all the time.
Yep.
And so I think that was a huge one, is how do we be adaptable, and how do we be adaptable in a way that we're still communicating well with our student athletes? Like
Right.
it's not enough for me to just be adaptable. They have to be. And so how do we teach them how to do that? So that's the first one I think that I would say. The second one I think as a head coach is um, learning your people on an individual basis. And I'm talking about your staff, I'm talking about your student athletes, I'm talking about support staff at the college. Like um I think as leaders, we have to understand our people and what drives them. And I certainly haven't always done a perfect job of that. But I think it's really valuable to understand that, hey, this person is motivated by X, Y, and Z, but this person is motivated by A, B, and C. And so you have to understand how you motivate those two people, how they come to certain conclusions, some of the things they've experienced in their childhood or in their adolescent years that are affecting how they approach situations now. And so I would say I spend a lot of time really trying to communicate and understand my student athletes. And that can be like, oh my gosh, your grandmother just passed away, let's talk about it. Or it can be like, hey, what's a day in your life that you love to relive? Because then I get a picture of, okay, so it was this concert that they went to and it was really fun because X, Y, and Z. And so just having random conversations with them all the time, I think is super important.
For sure, yeah. I love the idea. I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I like the idea of getting to know my athletes and just people around me. I think it's beneficial. And like you said, if you get to know the people on campus or your other staff, it just the image, even if it's just on surface that they see y'all laughing or going out to lunch or whatever, walking around campus, like it goes a long ways in a youth, or really in a lot of people's minds. So I can understand that and I can appreciate that. So as you talk to, and by the way, the whole what motivates you and understanding that, I think is super underrated.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge thing, and I try to get to know my people and everything like that, and we have really good relationships and good conversations and stuff like that. Not only with the women's side, but there's some, obviously I help with the men's side as well when I can. So there's some good relationships over there as well. But I think also just asking straight up, like, hey, what motivates you?
Yeah.
I think is also an underrated question because in wrestling, everybody talks about, in wrestling, it's you versus you and you versus your opponent, right? I mean, it is a team sport, but it's individual. So, their goals are to be an All-American, right? They all want to be on the board and, especially the 2-year level, they want to do well here and then trampoline to a 4-year somewhere, right? And so those are all good goals, but I think understanding the motivation behind it is important, and sometimes not taking the time, I guess, to even ask that. And you could know a lot about somebody and not know what their motivation is, and I think that's why that's an underrated key to your relationships.
And I think too, it's also, and maybe this is another answer to this question as a head coach, but understanding like you don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay for you to ask them. Like you bring that up, and I currently have a student athlete who just a dynamic player for us, and she's a sophomore this year. She played her entire freshman year. And I asked her this year, we were warming up for a fall game. And sometimes I never know with warm up because I have some kids that just they don't want to talk to anybody. They want to do their own thing. They want to prep. I have some kids that want me to continue to critique things in their warm up right before a game. And this particular kid, I didn't know which way she wanted me to go. And sometimes, like most of the time, I feel like I can figure that out myself. But I went up to her and I'm like, hey, dude, like, do you want me to talk to you before a game or do you not? Because I can't get a feel for it.
Yeah.
And she's like, she just kind of chuckled and she's like, I'd really like for you to talk to me, which is not the way I would have gone had I not asked her, just based on her personality and things like that. And it's okay to ask. It's okay to say straight up to him, like, hey, I want to put you in the best position to succeed. So help me help you. But I think sometimes particularly as head coaches, we get this idea of like, well, we have to have all the answers and we need to figure it out all by ourselves and we can't ask them those types of questions. And it's like, well, why? Isn't our job to help them be the most successful they can be? Like, my job is to help you, and I'm having a hard time figuring that out, so I'm just going to ask it. And I think sometimes, I don't know if it's our own pride or us feeling like we need to have all the answers, but I'm like, sometimes it's okay to ask.
And that's the thing too is, like that person as a sophomore might want that, but junior year she might be a different
Maybe
person
not.
because
Yeah.
of she might be a different person, she might be gone through whatever the case is. So I think not only to know that as they walk in as freshmen, but or whenever they show up on campus, because I know you do probably deal with transfers maybe a little bit more than others,
Sure.
at least more than I would, of course. But the idea is whoever shows up, right, might be different from year to year just based off of everything. So I think that's might be one of those things where that's not just a one-time thing. That's like as they're maturing or as they're changing, you're also seeing how you can adjust. I mean, we have to, but you're also seeing how you can adjust to help them year to year as well. So, yeah, I love that. Okay. So speaking of, I guess like you said, that dynamic player who's a freshman who's now going into her sophomore year, or excuse me, in her sophomore year. Whenever you think about development of an athlete, right? Like they show up as a freshman. Not every freshman is going to be a starter right off
Yep.
right off the bat, right? And sometimes they may not even see the field till senior year, just depending on how things work, positions, whatever. So long story short, when you think about development, where do you start? Like where do you start with your development of an athlete? And I know it varies from athlete to athlete and where they sit. So maybe not like, I know it's case by case, but maybe on a more general level, where do you start with development?
Yeah, I think the most important place you have to start with development is you have to understand. I don't think you can develop them until you understand them. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, that kind of goes back to what I maybe already mentioned, but you have got to put a significant amount of time and effort into understanding what drives them, maybe some of their traumas, how they respond to things. You have to communicate with them because then I think you can start the developmental process. And I realize that's much more of like a mental thing than it is a physical thing. Um, but let's say I'm coaching an athlete really hard and I'm pushing them into something and they're really struggling and they're not adjusting and they're not adapting. And then come to find out on the back end that there was some situation where they had a coach that coached them like that and it was a disaster. And then I have not, I now need to backpedal out of a situation versus being proactive, getting to know them and working from there. Now, understanding that I get these kids for hopefully 4 or 5 years, it's going to be a process. I'm not going to learn everything I need to know about them right away. Okay. You're going to learn as they grow. But I want them to know straight out of the gate, I have your back.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what your history is, regardless of what you put on the field, regardless of your execution, I have your back.
I got you. Yeah.
And then from there, I think you can build on certain things. So,
Yeah, I mean, the more they trust you, the more they buy in, right? The more they more that they love where they are, and the more, just plain and simple, the more they trust you, the more they will trust what you say, which will help develop. So, absolutely. By the way, you can't develop them until you understand them. Might be one of the better. I mean, might be a clip moment. That's a good one, just so you know. But that's a good one, yeah, for sure. So yeah, absolutely. So referencing development, since we're on the topic, let's just say let's say there's a sophomore, right? No intention on leaving. She's just trying to develop. She loves you. She loves the school, whatever. But I don't know, some schools have JVs, so I know some like 4 years have JVs, but let's say she's not a JV girl, but let's just say she's a bench player, right? She's not getting a lot of PT. She's whatever the case is, she's just not playing a whole lot. But obviously her goal is to play, right? So essentially, how do you get a kid who is a non-starter, a JV player, whatever the case is, and whatever sport it is, in yours in particular, how do you get a kid who's not a starter to develop to a starter? And I know it's also a case by case basis too. Not everybody develops the way you hope they do out of high school, but the idea is if they have the drive, they have the work ethic. How do you get them to go from bench to mound, basically?
yeah, that's great. I think the first thing, that's a two-sided question. I think that I have a responsibility with that. I think they have a responsibility with
Mm.
that. I think up front, it's super important for us to be honest with them. If we're having end of season meetings with let's say a bench player, and we're like, oh, you're so great, you're going to play next year, everything's going to be great, and we're not being honest with them, then we're setting them up to be, first of all, we're lying to them, and second of all, or manipulating them. And then we're setting them up to be really, really frustrated next year when they're not playing and they're like, well, you said I was going to play, and all these different types of things. So I think it's important that we're honest with them and we say like, hey, look, the reason that we, that you didn't get the opportunities that you were looking for this year is because we felt like you were lacking a little bit in these areas. And that can be really hard for student athletes to hear because they don't want to hear that they're lacking in anything.
For sure.
But again, how can you get better at something if I never tell you how to get better at it or what you need to get better at?
Right.
And so again, I think we have to be careful. It can't be like, you suck at this. And like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important that we sit down and say like, hey, if you want the opportunities that I think that you want, then these are the things that you need to do to get there. And then the back part of that is they have to have the work ethic and the mental makeup to handle that tough conversation and flip the script. Because if they don't, then all they're doing is they're just going to be mad at you that they had that conversation. Right. They're going to leave. Or different things like that. So it's two parties. It takes two to tango. Like I have to be honest with them. They have to want to make corrections, and then hopefully we can meet in the middle there. And then the other thing that I would say on that is it's really important. This is a lesson I've learned as I've been a head coach. Is it's really important. What's the phrase that I really like? I gotta look it up because it's really good. No partial parenting is what it is. And it's just the concept of like, no matter what that person is doing on the field, what they're doing off the field, doing on practice, you have to engage them all the same. I'm not saying that means fair playing time. I'm not saying that means we treat them all the same, but we do need to engage with them all the same. I can't only engage with my starters and then never pay attention to my bench players. I have to engage with all of them. And again, the way I coach those players might be different, but I can't just ignore one group because they're not giving me results. So no partial parenting. You have to fully, completely, quote unquote, parent your whole party.
Everybody.
Yeah, you got to treat your worst player like your best player, and vice versa, and it's discipline and everything. So absolutely,
and it's hard when the wins come into the conversation because you're like, well, I have to, in order to keep my job, I have to win, and in order to win, I'm going to need to focus on this group of people. But in reality, what I've learned is like, yes, this on the field maybe is the group of people that's helping you win, but if this group is angry or you're not feeding into them or they're toxic, they can derail what this group is doing. And so it's really, really important that we engage with them all.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I actually haven't talked about this with anybody on any show, which if I guess congratulations, you're the first one. So, I mean, I don't know I'm going to ask it, but we're going to go with, like you said, go with the punches and just roll with it, I guess. So, so you're talking about, like toxicity and or, the idea that they may not be starters. In a sport like yours, and a lot of sports, basketball, football, softball, baseball, it doesn't really matter. I mean, your responsibility, not maybe it's you, maybe it's the coaching staff, whatever. Your job is to put the best team together to go compete, right? At the end of the day, even though you want everybody to have fun and enjoy their experience, whatever, and not be that toxic side, that second group you mentioned, your job is also to put together a competitive team. So when it comes to your selections of players, right? Like, how are you getting people? Like, okay, for example, you have two girls who are really, really solid at third base, right? They both have great footwork or feet work, or both have good footwork. There we go. Both have pretty solid arms. The reaction times are good. They both are really good. One's a decent slapper. One's really just powerful from the right side. Whatever. They're both productive, and they can both be beneficial to the team pretty much any given day. How are you choosing this person over that person, knowing that they're both, and let's say they both are doing well in the classroom, so there's nowhere that you can fault back on there, right? They're both great team players, whatever the case is. Let's just say they're ideal together, right? off the field, on the field, whatever. So how are you choosing them, and how do you keep the other person who's just as good and knows they're just as good from falling off the wagon, wanting to transfer, whatever the case is? So how are you keeping them both engaged whenever you choose one or the other? Whenever at the end of the day it's your decision.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really hard. There's a lot of pieces that go
Oh,
into
is there?
that
Okay.
conversation. Yeah,
That's
because
fair.
I think on a really simplistic, purely coaching, not taking into account any of the mental or emotional stuff. Some of it might be as simple as what's the matchup? Who are we playing? Do they
Mm,
is there somebody that does maybe one thing a little bit better than the other? So like let's say we have one third baseman that does a one of those two kids is better with an on the run type quick throw than the
right.
other one. And let's say the team that we're facing is a lot of bunters and slappers. Okay, well, then maybe in that situation, we go with the kid that does the on the run quick throw better because we know there's going to be a lot of small ball. So it could just be as simple as what's the matchup?
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I would say on that is I love the concept of having kids that are relatively equally matched because they push each other.
Of course.
And I think that's really, really important. And in fact, I heard somebody say this. I don't remember who it was, but just the concept of instead of pushing each other, each of us is going to climb higher and then pull the other one
Pull
up
each
with
other up.
us. And I really like that idea because then it's less about just me and it's me getting myself there, but then making sure that you're coming with me. And then that's how our team as a whole gets a lot better. That doesn't really
Yeah.
answer the question that you asked, but it just
Still.
came up as I was thinking.
Yeah.
Still great though.
Yeah. And then the other thing as far as like how do you keep both kids happy? I think you have to keep feeding into like this concept of a full team staff, a full group. So maybe when one kid's playing third base, the other one, if they're more of a power hitter, they fill a DH role or something like that. And just buying into, okay, what's my role for today? And I'm going to be a master at the role that I have today while I continue to pursue the role that I want tomorrow. And
Right.
so I think you just have to keep feeding into that. It goes back to the no partial parenting. Make sure you're feeding into everything that they do and continuing to build into them and what they bring to the program. And then I think also to just understanding like um, there's game players and practice players. And just because you're really, really capable of succeeding in practice doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to do that in a game. And
In a
so there's
game.
an execution piece of this that is critically important. And it's not really something, I mean, you can kind of train it and kind of teach it. But some of it is just built into these kids of like, I freaking want to compete.
Yeah.
And so I actually have a couple kids on my team now that like most of the time at practice, they're just like, meh. They're not bad, they're just average. But
Yeah.
then they get in the game and it's like they're a totally different kid because they want to compete and they want to smash you into the ground. Like
Yeah.
that's just how they are. And so understanding that there's a flip side of that too though, and there's
Mm,
kids that are really good in practice and can't handle the
mm,
pressure and the execution. And so that's a big piece of it because at the end of the day, as much as I love you and care for you, what you do in a game competition setting is what goes on the record. And so that's a really important piece.
absolutely. I can definitely appreciate the idea of understanding that some people are game players and some people aren't. And I've had that in wrestling too. It's pretty frustrating, in my
Hmm.
opinion, because it feels like they're going through the motion in practice. And they might be, they may not be, but they're just super, like you said, eh.
Yeah.
And then they show up to the match and they wrestle really hard. And it's kind of frustrating because, there's some people out there who don't have that luxury
Yeah.
of being able to wrestle. They how they practice is how they wrestle a lot of times,
Absolutely.
right? And that can be that way in most sports. Um, but it can be frustrating when you see somebody who doesn't have that quote unquote pure talent, who they've had to work hard everywhere to
Right.
get there, and they can't do that. They have to practice hard for them to be able to have those results show up on the mat, and vice
Right.
versa. So I can see how that can be one of those things. It can be hard and frustrating as a coach, I'm sure, especially in your realm, because I mean, I'm not saying there's politics or anything like that in your sport. I
Hmm.
know that that's always a conversation of politics and team sports, of head coaching, whatever.
Sure.
Um, but the idea I feel like can be hard for you is like, well, you also having, especially without fall ball, and I know fall ball probably helps out a lot with your springtime decisions, but if you didn't have a fall ball, you're 100% basing your starting lineup on what you see in practice, right? So the idea that some of those girls who are not able to compete, they don't compete well until they're in the game,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
You wouldn't really know that if they're actually going to be that person. You can call bottom of the
That's right.
seventh, bases loaded. We need a pinch hitter. You can go in to compete at this, against pitcher. So you wouldn't know that unless you had fall ball.
Hmm.
But I can see how that can be, kind of a hard place to be for you.
Yeah.
And maybe even as maybe not as a team, because I think that's a benefit for your team having that many good. If you have that many
Yeah.
good players, that's obviously means you're doing well. But yeah, I can definitely understand that. So whenever it comes to a few more new questions here,
Okay.
I did some thought process and was like, let's change some stuff up. So
Okay.
you're just the one today. Um, what's an overrated and slash underrated training method in softball?
Hmm.
Is that too hot? Is that too hot of a question for?
Mm-mm. No, I think um training method, huh?
It could,
I
yeah, and it could
think
be kind of anything that's to do with, um, yeah, I mean, I guess that's, and I say training method, I guess there's a lot to it. It could be infielding drills, outfielding drills, pitching, hitting. It could be weight room stuff, really anything that's to do with softball. Um, what do you think is an overrated, underrated thing that's going on?
I think an underrated one, but is becoming more um correctly rated.
Okay, fair.
um is the idea of like just movement prep. And so I think sometimes we just want to like launch right into whatever we're doing. But there's this idea of like again going back to learning the individual, how they typically move, what they're more likely to do. I think that is underrated right now, but is becoming more popular is just studying the student athlete, how they move, and then and it could be simple things. It could be like PVC pipe rotations. It could be using a med ball, those types of small kind of
Hmm.
movement prep that help just engage the hitter or the defender into their reps. And so instead of just launching right into a rep, really kind of focusing on the body and activating things before
Mm,
you do kind of the big movement.
yeah.
So I'd say that that's kind of coming on. An overrated one. Hmm. I think, and maybe I see this more in youth, because we see our freshmen struggle with it a lot, is overrated just hitting reps. So like
Mm,
outfielders just going out and taking reps. Good at times, right? But I think when we don't teach the kids why they're doing something and just have them go do something, then it's really hard for them to learn to get better because they don't understand what they're doing.
right.
And so we see it a lot in our freshmen of just like they come in and they're like, well, first of all, we practice so much more than we play in college versus travel. They play so
Right.
much more than they practice. And so just the transition of like, oh my gosh, I'm practicing so much is a really hard thing for them to kind of come to terms with. And then when
Yeah.
you throw them into drills where they have to use this more than they've had to use it ever in their life, it can be a really hard challenge for them to come to. So I think just it's overrated to just like hit them reps and assume that they're going to do it. Like you have to, if you're going to do that, that's fine. We'll do that. But there are times where it's like, okay, on that rep, it should have been this way. Like you need to teach
Yeah.
as you
Yeah.
go. You can't just hit them reps and assume that they're going to figure it out because they don't know.
Right. Right. Yeah. Positioning is not natural. You have to be able to
Right.
teach them that. And yeah, somebody said that in a wrestling term too, head position, which is crazy to think like knowing where your head should be whenever you're wrestling somebody, which might
Hmm.
seem weird to think about, but like where your head position is not a natural thing. You have to teach it and drill it. And so
Hmm.
there's plenty of things with footwork and how your hips are turning
Yeah.
for the outfield, I'm sure. Like, I mean, I'm a big baseball guy. I've said this all the time. I mean, I've watched the College World Series on the women's side, the Women's College World Series since I was 8 or 9 years old, if not
Hmm.
younger. So I'm a huge softball and baseball fanatic, so I can understand, those little technical movements is something
Yeah.
that
you may not, some people learn from an early age, hence why
Right.
some people can get drafted so high so early, and it's why some people don't have the opportunity to do it. Now, there's variables there too, but the
Sure,
idea
sure,
is
sure.
that those little movements, some people don't learn till they have the right coach at that next level, whatever, right? So I can understand that. You mentioned the youth thing a few times. One, because you were part of Nebraska. It was the
Yep, Nebraska Gold.
Quakers, but it is
So
the
it was
but
the
it
Quakes, and
is
then which is still an organization, but then my team
okay.
kind of mixed with another team and made the first Nebraska
Became
Gold team.
national.
Yep.
Okay. So Nebraska Gold, right? And you just mentioned it just now about how youth can sometimes struggle with these things
Hmm.
as a whatever the case is. So, um, do you think, and this is kind of the only recruiting question I'm going to ask you today. It's kind of I usually ask a lot of recruiting, but this is
Hmm.
going well, so I don't really want to dive into that a whole lot. But kind of recruiting, I mean, just
Hmm.
talking about the idea of the youth scene, right? So, do you think as a college coach, you have like that these kids need to be in a travel ball system in order
Hmm.
for them to be seen by college coaches at a high
Hmm.
level? And then and then maybe the secondary question that which you might be able to mix in there is, do you think that it's important in general? Like, how do you feel about travel ball in general with what it used to be
Sure.
to where what it is now? Because what it is now is not what it was 10 years ago or
Correct.
15 years ago. It's a whole nother beast now, right? And
Yeah.
so and that's kind of every sport, but I feel like baseball, softball, basketball are kind of the big three with major AAU stuff, travel ball stuff,
Yep.
whatever. So yeah, if you want to answer it, there we go, in that way. I know I'm kind of ranting on it now, but
You're good.
um where do you feel about it, and do you feel like it's necessary?
Yeah, I'm gonna start with this disclaimer. Um, I think there are people out there that can get recruited to high level programs that do not go the travel ball route or the
Hmm.
AAU route, but it's really rare. And so it's speaking in general, I do think it's important that you're part of that travel ball experience
Hmm.
for a couple reasons. One being we have a limited amount of time. So as a college coach, I am so much more likely to go to a 2-day tournament where there's 50 teams
Yeah.
than to the small towns youth weekend league night that has 2 teams in it, right? Just because I don't have that much time.
You're right. Yeah.
And so it's a lot, and I hate even saying that because I know there's good talent out there that isn't on travel teams. But as far as like having the time to go out and recruit, we are so much more likely to go to a big tournament than we are that's something small.
Yeah.
The second thing that I would say on that is what's really great about travel is then when I'm recruiting that, I know this kid has been playing at a high level. And so
Hmm.
that's only going to help me on the back end versus maybe we have a superstar out of a really small town that played for their town team forever. I'm not speaking 100% across the board, but for the most part, that kid's probably not playing as high level caliber teams as the kid on a travel ball team. And so I think that's important to note as well. So, do you have to get recruited? No, but I
Right.
do think it's a good thing for them to do. Now, understanding travel is extremely expensive.
That part.
It's turned into chaos. I mean,
Hmm.
when we have parents at Penn U that are posting their kids like batting, like I don't care what your kid's batting average is at 10. I have no I don't care. Like that doesn't matter. And so like we've gotten recruiting coordinators and coaches and parents into this concept that they need to be recording everything from the point where this kid is 8 years old is crazy. At that point in time, learn to
Agreed.
play the game, increase your softball knowledge, have fun. Because the reality is, these 8-year-olds will turn into 16-year-olds someday. But if they hate their life at 8 years old, do you think they're playing at 16? No.
Absolutely not.
So it's turned into kind of a beast of a
Yeah,
thing.
it
Um,
is.
so I don't know. It's
I,
it's a
I
broad question with many aspects.
I agree. I think you could have a whole podcast series on talking to coaches about if this is a if it's beneficial or not. I think the hardest contributing I think the hardest contributing factor to AAU is the pay to play aspect, which is fair, but also I think is the how much it costs. And I also think an argument that some people may make is like, are you actually the money that we're spending, right? Whether it's 1,500 a tournament, which I have heard that is some per person. I've seen some that it's 1,500 a year, right? Depending, I mean, obviously 1,500 times 15 kids. I mean, that's pretty good money. But whatever the argument is, like, it's a lot of money. So like, you might have a really really talented person who even with through fundraising doesn't have the ability to cover or pay to play on a travel team, right? So, like, I feel like it can be convoluted in a lot of aspects just because, like, I don't think every talented player, there's obviously a lot of talent. Like, I've heard something a long time ago, you probably heard about it, is like Michael Jordan was really good, but there was somebody out there who was probably better than Michael, but that he couldn't get seen because of whatever, right? And same thing I think with every sport out there. I think there's somebody possibly better. It's just they didn't have the opportunity, right? Whether it's self-inflicted or social inflicted, whatever. So I just think it's interesting, especially from today's space. Like you said, it's a beast, and it can be really hard to navigate for youth parents, especially they think that they have to get their kid into travel ball at a young age. Like I think, like my kids play baseball. I think that if they want to do travel ball, like that, probably that 10 to 12, maybe 12, like that 11 to 13 range is really where I like to uh, start considering getting them into it. Kind of that early middle school, I guess that 10 to 12 range, just because I want them to enjoy the sport. And by that time, right, that's when we can start taking a little bit more serious. And I think until they're 10 for some kids are still too young for that, for some kids to handle it, some kids not. This is all just me, of course, my own personal thought. But that 10 to 12 range for true travel ball, for true financial speaking, whatever, is kind of where they get into it. And then obviously you can navigate it from there. But like you said, the 8-year-old getting their thing posted is kind of crazy. Knowing that that's no one's getting recruited at 8 years old. I'm sorry. So it is what it is. So that's fair. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and your dive in on a really hot topic there. My final. Well, it's not my final. I have a few more questions for you, but this one right here is the final new question, and then we'll dive into the last few of the podcast every time. So, but you've talked about kids who may not have who may have struggled or not known stuff out of high school, right? Who come in as freshmen and you have to reteach some basics, whatever. But I think as a team too, this could go. You can answer this towards that too. But how do you teach athletes to respond to failure? In terms of whether it's a team thing and we made it to this point and we lost, or individually, this girl's been working really hard to be the starter and she fails, like I guess how we mentioned earlier with the two athletes. So, well, however you want to answer that, but how do you respond, or how do you teach your athletes to respond to that, to failure or a loss or whatever?
That's a really, really good question. And it's a really like hot question now, because just the way that society has shifted a little bit, kids don't naturally know how to do that. And
Right.
so it is something that we actively teach responding to failure. And part of that is the way we talk about it. So there's a couple things that go into this question. The first thing is the way we talk about it. So I talk really optimistically about failure, which I know sounds really crazy. But to me, and I said this a little bit earlier, I think failure, it's so often looked at, particularly from a female's perspective, it's so often looked at as a reflection of me. If I fail, then I'm a failure. And I don't think that that's true at all. I think that if you failed, what it tells me is that you were actually courageous enough to try something that you weren't comfortable doing. And so to me, failure is a byproduct of courage, not of
Right.
your character. And so
Mm,
again, you heard me say it earlier, but like I want to teach my kids to fail flying and then fail better. It isn't a
fail
matter of
flying.
it isn't a matter of um I want to try to avoid failure. You will not ever be able to avoid failure. You will fail. So the question is, do you want to fail because you were courageous enough to try something new and it just went a little sideways? Or do you want to fail because you were too scared to try, so you don't do anything? Um, and
Right.
then and then learn to fail better. Learn from your failure. So again, if you fail and don't learn from it, then you just continue to perpetuate
Go
that
down.
cycle.
Yeah.
If you fail but you learn from it, then you're doing what I like to call progressive failure, which again is a good thing. Progressive failure is a good thing because eventually it's going to end up in success.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk really highly about failure. I want to encourage my kids in that space. And again, I don't always do a good job of that because our reaction when they fail is to be like, wow, why did you do that? But we have to be in control and understand that we need to speak positively about failure.
Yep. Yeah, I saw this pre-football speech one day, and he was talking about how winning, everybody's chasing winning, but winning doesn't care about you. Winning does not care how hard you work, how much effort you put in, how much you didn't sleep, how much you didn't eat, whatever the case is. Winning doesn't care. And so if you're chasing winning, understand what that comes with, right? All the failures leading to it, right? So how are you willing, are you like, where are you at mentally? Um, like, are you mentally able to overcome all those to get to that win, right? And get to those wins. So I can appreciate that a lot, especially in the terms of like whenever you see other teams winning around. Like one of my favorite quotes is "Comparison's the thief of joy." And so, when you actually let that sink in, and it might be your first time here. I know it. I mean, whether it's yours or not, but when somebody hears it for the first time and they actually understand it, it can really make some changes, in my opinion. So, just understand it's a process, right? Progressive
Yes.
failures is a great word, and just trust the process, and it'll hit at some point. You just gotta don't quit.
And I think too, the other thing that we try to do with failure is like we actively will come up with, maybe it's a drill that's incredibly difficult to get our kids to a point where they fail. And then I think it's really important that we let them live in that for a little bit. I'm not talking hours, but like don't rush to save them from their failure. Like let them feel it and understand it and learn from it and learn how to react to it and then teach them how to overcome it. So we do what we call our failure recovery system. And so
Mm.
let's say we have a shortstop that boots a ball. We will like, as we're teaching this, I won't hit another rep until that kid goes and failure recovers. And what that means is they have to go to another person on our team. There has to be some sort of ownership. So like, hey, that was my bad. That's on me. Whatever it is, because it's important that we own like, hey, I screwed up on
Yeah.
that. But then there has to be a physical touch. So they generally high five or pat gloves or something like that. That comes just from science. Like when we
Yeah.
touch other people, it releases endorphins and it helps calm us down. So there has to be a physical touch. There has to be eye contact because I think it's really easy. Like if I walk up to you and I'm like, "Oh, hey, that's on me. I screwed up," but I'm not looking at you. It's really
Different.
easy to, yeah, it's really easy to just kind of brush over it. But I have to look, if I have
Mm.
to look it in your eyes and tell you like, "Hey, that was on me. I screwed up." I have to own that a little bit more. And
Yeah.
then hopefully what the idea is that when I come to you and we failure recover, you don't care about my failure. I do. I care a lot about my failure. So
Yeah.
I'll hold on to it. But when I look at you in the eyes and I high five you or whatever, what we tell our kids is it's like me giving you my failure because you're not going to hold on to my failure. You're going
Of
to
course.
dump my failure.
Yeah.
And so if I give it to you, then I'm free of it. You're going to dump it. And it gives us as a team the whole chance to move forward. So we literally the first time I taught this to them, they were like, this is really different. And so
Yeah.
I actually had the whole team watching and one kid going at a time, and they had to throw a ball to this little box. I stole this from Sue Inquist, who is she
Okay.
used to coach at UCLA, and now she does a lot of motivational speaking. So this is not my idea. I stole it from her. But they had to throw to this little box, and if they missed the box, they had to go and failure recover with someone else on the team. And everybody thought it was really funny, and they were laughing, and it was really awkward. But because it was funny, and because it was kind of different and kind of weird, they just caught on to it. Like they
Yeah.
just it was something that they were like, oh, okay, this is funny. And so it kind of helped relax them at times. Now
Yeah.
there'll be times,
Absolutely.
a lot of times they know now, like, hey, if I boot a ball, I got to go failure recover. But if they don't, then again, we'll stop until they go and failure recover because we believe it's that important of a concept.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I really like that. That's actually really unique, and weird, but it's almost like I don't know. It's weird, but it's also really nice. Like it's kind of one of those things where it holds accountability, and it also just one of those things where it's like, your teammates learn to have your back and like, hey, it's all right, pick you up, right, type of thing. So there's more than just it's more than just I know it's there's the surface level depth, and then there's a way deeper depth in that. So I can respect that. So well, cool. So I have my final few questions here. These are the in-depth ones. These are my favorite ones. These are the philosophy ones, which you've given a lot of philosophy naturally, and it's been outstanding. So I really appreciate all your gems you've given. But I have I'm really interested to hear or how you feel about this, or where you're coming from. This is, how do you build a successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset?
Mm, hmm. I think outside of what we've already talked about, which is creating
Yeah.
a culture where they're free to be them, and then also that we
Hmm.
have their back. Those are really important things. But I think on top of that, you have to be super intentional about your culture. You can't assume that culture is just going to develop itself. You have to teach it. You have to train it.
Yeah.
And so we will talk about it a lot, and we'll give the kids a voice in it. Like, what do you guys want this to be? What do you want our identity to be? And kind of go from there. But a big thing that we found that has helped kind of that concept of buy-in is, um, I'm going to say goal setting, but it's not as simple as just like, okay, let's set some SMART goals and then let's never talk about them again. Because I feel like that's the common thread, is it's like, okay, we need these SMART goals, and then they're just kind of out there. We have taken the concept of, like, when we set goals, I put them everywhere. I one of their practice shirts has our goals on it. We put our goals up on each of their lockers. We put them in our office. We put them everywhere, and we talk about them all the time. And so we're constantly coming back to this concept. And I'm talking team goals, not individual
Yeah.
goals, because team goals rally the group. That's the buy-in. Can you get these kids to buy into this idea? All these different personalities, all these loud personalities, to buy into one or two concepts. And then we reinforce it with small goals. So like I'm going to use last year as an example. This program, Wayne State College, hadn't won 20 games in 10 years. Okay. It was a program that was really struggling. And so we had this saying, it was 20 over 14. The 14 doesn't really matter for this, so we're just going to stick on the 20. But the 20 was, okay, we're going to win 20 games this year. We're going to do it. And so what we did after every game is I had this like binder, and all it had was like a piece of computer paper with a 20 on it. And when we won our first game, we ripped the 20 off. And so like after every single game, we were doing something that reinforced our goals, and it became something that was really fun for them. So like after the game, we'd pick a player of the game, and then that player got to rip the sheet off, and they got really into it. They'd rip it off, they'd rip it in half, they'd stomp on it. I'm pretty sure somebody
Yeah.
like ate it at one point in time. So they got super into this concept of like, okay, this is our goal, and we're doing it together. And we won 31 games last year. So
Oh,
and
sweet.
not that that's not the only reason, that's not my point, but just this idea of set big goals, reinforce them constantly, and then make sure they're seeing their small incremental wins as you track on that goal. And again, it gets them all to buy into a singular concept. So don't set 10 goals, set one or two, and then buy into it like crazy.
Yeah, I love that. So as you're speaking on, like, I know like 30 games isn't like the ultimate goal, whatever the case is, right? But I know there's
Mhm.
more
Big
more
for
depth
us.
to it than that, right? But obviously it's huge. So the question I asked, and the reason why I asked this is, and I didn't mean it, and it's not taking anything away from what you did, but I
No, no,
think
no,
it's a
no.
good
You're fine.
question on the level of, how do you build a successful team on the level of wins and longevity, right? So like obviously you walked into a place that hadn't won 20 games, and now you've gotten to 30 or 31, excuse me. So now how do you not only
Great question.
reciprocate that year next or this coming season, but then how do you just maintain that over the next few years? And I know recruiting is a big piece of that. I know having the right talent matters, right? But in general, outside of recruiting, I should say, how do you sustain that, 30 plus wins now? Because now that might be the new norm. Now, if 30 is our goal, that's what we got to. Now our new goal might be 30. So now how do you get to 30 every year and continue to push past it?
Right. Yep. We keep stacking on it. I think that's the really important part. You mentioned it, but success breeds success. And so
Mhm.
hopefully from a recruiting perspective, we continue to get in good talent. But just from where our team is at. I think it's really important to continue to speak to them about using last year as a launching pad. Like
Yeah.
last year was so much about relearning how to win. You have to learn how to win. It's not something you just do. And so, last year was so much about relearning how to win. And so now this year, we've set 3 goals in front of them. We want to stack another 30 plus win season. We want to be a top 6 seed in our conference tournament, which we were not last year out of 15 teams. And we want to win the tournament. And so, again, we're taking what we did last year, we're plussing on those goals.
Something. Yeah.
And again, I'm putting it in front of them everywhere. And then we explain to them why we're doing things. So one adjustment we made this year was in the fall, we went from 3 lifting days to 4 lifting days. And so when I told them that, I'm like, hey, we had a great year last year and we broke a lot of records from a hitting perspective. But one area we felt like that we could really get better was increasing our stamina and our strength in the weight room. So we're going to add another day. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to take what we did last year and we want to plus on it. Last year was great, but it's not the end goal. And so making sure they understand and that they get a voice in it. At times they'll be like, hey, coach, can we work on this or can we do this? And I think that that's actually really important when they do that, because then they're owning it. Then they're coming out and saying, hey, I want to do this because I think it's going to help us as a team get better.
Yeah.
And so last year's a launching pad for what we want to do this year. And you never know how the year's going to go till you get in it.
Right.
But you just kind of keep preaching that concept of like, we're going to plus, we're going to stack, we're going to keep making sure we get better. We learned how to win last year, so we can't have to relearn that this year.
Yep.
We need to plus on what we did last
Yep.
year.
I love that. So my favorite question to ask here, it's actually the name of the show, is why do you do this? What is your coach's why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I figured this question was coming. I think for me, and everybody's different, but I've indicated it a couple times. For me, I believe that God built me to teach and be influential in the lives of these young women. And so I love this game. I love teaching this game, but I don't coach this game because of the game. I coach this game because of the kids.
People.
And like I said, I believe that God has opened doors in my life that have brought me here. And then I believe He's given me the tools to at least be a positive mentor in these young kids' lives. I'm not expecting to change their whole life. That's not my goal. I just want to be somebody that they can look back on and say, I trusted her to help me through whatever situation. Or, in 10 years, if something's going on, I hope that they think back and know that if they call me, I'll pick up the phone. Like,
Yep.
it's so important to me that these young women in a very, very influential time in their life have somebody that's in their corner, and somebody that's going to be truthful in that corner. Just because I'm in their corner doesn't mean that I'm going to blow smoke all the time. I'll tell them, I'm like, dude, you can't do that. That's not going to work. But I hope that they'll look back and think, she cared enough to tell me no, or she cared
Yeah.
enough to have a hard conversation. Because I think when they get into the quote unquote real world, it can be ugly at times. And so I really believe everything that these kids need to learn to be successful in life, they can learn in the athletic environment. And so I'm really gracious to have the opportunity to lead in that aspect.
I love your why. I know you've said it a few times, like the kids are. I know you said that at least 2 times prior to this, and so I love that your why is for the people and to make that difference, whether it's small or big, right? I love that, and I love all your really philosophy about the success and how you continue to stack, and your culture of really what you've done previously, or I should say what you walked into to what you have now, and really just everything about what you just mentioned. So I really appreciate you diving into that. It was really good. I appreciate it. And if you guys are still watching this podcast, if you guys are on YouTube, make sure you guys HTTP hit the bell. All the 9 yards, y'all know what to do. If you guys are an audio listener, make sure you guys hit those stars, leave a review, say what you got to say. But say it with your chest, because Coach and I want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Coach, I have one more question for you. It might be a hot topic, it might not be, but you may or may not you'll understand why I say this, but you may or may not ruffle some feathers with this one.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Grind some gears. Here we go. What state produces the best high school softball?
Ooh. Best high school softball. I mean, we have had some Nebraska teams be up there on the rankings, so I don't know how to answer that question. I think most realistically, you're gonna find the hottest bed for softball student athletes in the warmer states. I think that's obvious. When you get up into Nebraska and we're playing in 30 degrees, I don't think that's an optimal condition for softball.
Fair.
But you know what? I think there's talent out there all over the country. I think if these kids want to play, they have a place that they can play, whatever level that is, D1, D2, D3, JUCO, NAI. I don't care. If you want to play, there's a home out there for you. So I think that I have such a great opportunity to coach. I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and just continuing to learn as I go through this process as well. But as far as that question is concerned, good softball all across the country.
Oh man, I love it. That was You know what? I PR trained, politically correct. I love it. There was you didn't ruffle no feathers there. So you know what? That was a safe answer, and I will accept it, because that was the first time. I mean, it's the first time in a long time that somebody ran an answer like that and got me like, oh, that was a great answer in a lot of aspects. So I'll give that one to you. All right, touche. I like it. Yeah. But Coach, I really appreciate your knowledge and everything you've given throughout this whole show. I mean, I thought this was a really good one. Coach, thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciated the conversation. Had a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to get you back on here. I think it'd be cool to go into more softball dive this time if we were to talk. I know you love the sport, so we talked a little bit about it, but I think if we dive into it, you'll really be in your wheelhouse of like the love,
Yeah, that's great.
whatever. So love to get you back on here. But with that being said, guys, thank you all for listening again, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.